And now we can let everyone in. If
All
we're
right. Have a good show, everybody.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Metalbox Studios' Learning and Mending series. While we settle in and get into our squares, let me introduce myself. I'm Jen, and I would like to start us off with the embroidery of the week. These embroideries are sent back to the Metalbox Studio from you, our community. And tonight I am going to share a hermit thrush that was created by Olan Jones. And what I wanted to share with you, why I love this is the outlining is different, but the base of the body is one solid color, and I just thought this was extraordinary use of color. So that is our embroidery of the week. Now, before we get into the reading, I'd like to for all of us to do a quick popcorn sharing, introducing ourselves, what we're working on, where we're zooming in from. So I'll start again. My name's Jen, and I'm zooming in from Studio City, and I use she, her pronouns. And I will be working on this bird tonight, which I started in the last series. And during the holiday, I was able to make some major progress, but I still have a little bit more to go. And so I will now pass this on to Joan Borgman. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Joan Borgman in North Hollywood, Tongvalans, she, her, hers. I'm not doing any embroideries right now. I have done a few for the previous sessions, and I look forward to discussing this wonderful book with y'all. And I'll turn it over to Lauren. You're next on my screen. Lauren Bond.
Oh, hi. Lauren. I'm calling in from Topanga Canyon using she, they pronouns, and I am working on the not so common bee. And I will pass it on to Bex Epstein.
Hi, first time joining. My pronouns are she, her. I'm zooming in from Chicago, Illinois, and I'm just gonna be working on some drawings. I guess the next person on my screen is Izzy Santana.
Hi, my name's Izzy. I'm calling from East Hollywood, Los Angeles. My pronouns are they, she, and I'm really excited to read this book with you all tonight. And I'm working on the same embroidery I've been working on for a really long time now, so I'm kind of embarrassed to even admit it. Sorry, Jen, still working on it, but it's coming along. And I will pass it on to DeRainer.
Hi, Derainer, calling in from Baldwin Hills. I go by she, her pronoun, and I am working on this native sunflower and pollinators. So I'm excited to get started on this one and excited to listen in on the readings tonight. And I will pass it on to who's next on my screen that hasn't gone is Olan.
Hi, Olan, calling in from West Hollywood using she, her pronouns. Honored to be embroidery of the week. And I'm working on this now with golden threads. And I will pass this on to Jessica Johnston.
Hello, I'm Jessica, and I'm calling in from Rochester, New York. And I don't have an embroidery. Hi. Hello, friends. So nice to see you. I don't have an embroidery that I'm working on right now, but I'm crocheting. So this is a massive, I'll work on that. I look forward to hearing everything. I'm not sure who's next. Tamara, have you?
Hello, I'm Tamara Pullman. I'm calling from Hollywood. Actually, I have my friend Claire here too, also from Hollywood, Frogtown. And we both have done some of those embroideries back in the early day of the pandemic. I had an onion. Claire, what did you do?
I had mushrooms.
She had mushrooms. But I've never done this. Your invitation to the Mending and Learning series. So I've always wanted to read this book. I've had a copy of the book for several years and carry it around with me everywhere and never get to read it. And when I saw this, I said, I'm going to do it. And we are collectively working on a quilt for my brand new grandson. I'm going to flip my camera around so you can see it. That is a community quilt that was done by, all the squares were done by different ladies, and now we're putting it together. So we thought it'd be the perfect thing to do while we join this evening's thing. So that's us. We both go by she, her. And how about Kavi? Passing it on to Kavi.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Kavi Lal calling in from Sacramento. Looking forward to starting this new series together. And tonight I'll be sketching, just sketching as we're reading and listening along. And I think he, him pronouns. I'm sorry, I missed that. I came in a little late, so I'll pass it to Jen to pass it to somebody who hasn't gone. So sorry.
I will pass it to Rebecca. Russell.
Hi, everyone. Calling in from Rhode Island tonight, and this is original territory of Narragansett and Niantic peoples. This is my first time calling into this group. A friend of mine who's in the Los Angeles area gave me a nod that this was happening, and yeah, it really piqued my interest. So good to be here. I don't have an embroidery that I'm working on or a craft that I plan to work on tonight, but I did pull out my journal hearing that folks are doing some sketching, and so that called to me as a impromptu way to channel some creative energy with you all tonight. Good to be here.
Welcome. And if you want to pass it.
Yes, thank you. I will pass it to Jasmine Sarp.
Hello, I'm Jasmine. I'm calling in from Pasquenta, California. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm working on a hermit thrush, beginning to get some forms there. And really excited for this text. And I'm gonna pass it to Melody. Hi, Melody.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melody Hirose. First time to the group. I actually know Jasmine, but so I do not have embroidery. I'm actually calling from downtown Los Angeles. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm excited to hear. I'm really inspired by everyone's project, so I will hopefully have something going by next week. I'm excited to hear the text as well, and thank you for having me. I would like to pass it to Michelle.
I am not sure, Mish, if your audio is working, so I will pass it to Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Lane, and I am joining from Pasadena. My pronouns are she, her, and tonight I'll be working on a white sage that I started during the last session. And I will pass this along to Emily.
Thanks, Caitlin. Welcome back. Glad to have you here. My name is Emily, she, her pronouns, calling in from Echo Park neighborhood of Los Angeles. And tonight I'll be helping with the session by sharing the screen for us all to read from. And doing a bit of an offering after that with some audio visual meditations. And I just love this group. I love what we do here. I love the text that we read and the time we spend together and the crafting that we do. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of it. And let me see, let me pass it on to someone I don't know, just for fun, Steffi Nelson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steffi Nelson. My pronouns are she, her. This is my first time with this group, and I just happened to see on Instagram that you all were going to start reading this book. I just bought this book last week, so it's really exciting to me to suddenly have a whole group to talk about it with, to experience it together. I don't have a craft project, but I love the idea of having a craft project. So I'll try to find something for next week, maybe some needlepoint or embroidery or something like that. Thanks for having me.
And I'll actually take over at this point. Thank you, Steffi, and thank you for everyone for joining us tonight. I see some new faces, some familiar faces. So this series, She Braids Together, is the 7th iteration of Learning and Mending, following syllabi on abolitionist writing, indigenous perspectives of land stewardship, suffocation, Anna sings The Mushroom at the End of the World, systems thinking, and the commons. This time around, we'll be focusing on one text, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmer. She and her more than human interlocutors braid indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teachings of plants to tell us stories about the world. The world that is opened up to us through this text is the commons in its truest sense. It is a world of reciprocity and careful listening. This text and our collective time spent together, both reading, crafting, and discussing it, offers us a roadmap to a new way of being in the world. So, if you need another, or have not received an embroidery kit from us featuring native plants, birds, and microscopic organisms that the Metalbox Studio is currently cultivating on its project sites, please send your name and mailing address to info@metalboxstudio.org. Tonight, we will share our screen, and we encourage you to read a section of the text aloud with us. When there is a pause in the reading, please feel free to unmute yourself and begin where the last person left off. You don't have to read. We welcome you to enjoy a gentle and supportive space of listening as well. And I will now pass it over to Izzy, where she will begin tonight's reading.
Thank you, Jen. I'm so excited to get started on this book with everyone. Just to say a few words, I definitely see a lot of familiar faces from the last series where we read about the commons. And Jen briefly mentioned this in her lovely intro, but in many ways, this book is speaking to and continuing the conversation of the commons that we have, a lot of us have been committed to with each other. And what's lovely about this book is she takes indigenous wisdom and braids that in with, more with scientific wisdom that's like rooted in more scientific language that often poetics are lacking from. She invites poetics into that space in a really beautiful way. And the selections we're reading for tonight, the preface, she kind of gets into that, and then Sky Woman Falling, which is a Haudenosaunee creation story where you see her coming right up with with her amazing ability to tell stories through poetry and science and playing with language. So sorry, everyone, I'm really nervous tonight because there's a lot of new people. So I'm really stumbling on my words. So I'm just gonna pass it over to the screen share because I'm not really making sense.
Izzy, if that's you not making sense, then you made perfect sense.
Thank you. There's so many new beautiful faces. It's making me nervous. So it's gonna be fun though. I'm excited.
Yes, don't worry at all. We all support you and we all support each other. This is a supportive, gentle, kind space that we all co-create together. And you know, the first night of a new series, there's always working out the kinks. So for instance, okay, so I am co-host, that's good. I just need to pull up tonight's reading. So just give me a moment while I do that. And Lauren, I wasn't sure if there was anything that you might want to throw into the collective brain share before we start, but if you do, there's definitely space for that at the moment.
While you're pulling up the text, I'd just like to give a shout out to the Beach Museum at Kansas State University for the flyer art that you saw on our Instagram. Those incredible photos I had the privilege to see a few years ago are so spectacular and helping us understand not just what the prairie grasses of this continent look like above the ground, but what they look like below the ground. And I think that was just such a stunning thing to behold and to kind of comprehend that we're talking about a territory that stretched over most of the North American continent, that had those prairie grasses, that used to have wild ranging buffalo and native people that lived in an interdependent way with the buffalo and the grasses. And that was only 150 years ago when all that started to change. So just to put some perspective on you know, this precarious moment we find ourselves in, gives us time to reimagine not only the world we want to co-create, but the world that existed where we are not so very long ago. And it's in that spirit that the synthesis of Robin Wall Kimmerer's magic mind, science, and poetry connect with some of the collections that I knew existed at Kansas State University. So we're really happy that we were able to bring that visually here today. KM.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that context. It's really helpful. I have found the PDF and now I'm going to share my screen right here. And you guys just let me know if the size is all right and all of that type of parameter. And Izzy, can you remind me where we're starting off tonight?
Yeah. We're starting off with the preface.
Perfect. So, right there at the beginning.
Exactly. And we won't be reading all of, we won't be reading the chapters in order, but also kind of in the spirit of the book, being a braid and honoring time as something that's nonlinear, and storytelling as something that's nonlinear. It feels fitting to kind of hop around.
Love it. So how does the text look, Izzy? Are we good as far as what you see from me?
It works for me.
Okay.
Good.
Great. Okay, well, I'm going to mute myself and we shall begin.
Hello, Michelle from Asteroida. Hold out your hands and let me lay upon them a sheaf of freshly picked sweetgrass, loose and flowing, like newly washed hair. Golden green and glossy above, the stems are banded with purple and white where they meet the ground. Hold the bundle up to your nose. Find the fragrance of honey-eyed vanilla over the scent of river water and black earth, and you understand its scientific name, Hierococle odorata, meaning the fragrant holy grass. In our language, it is called wingast, the sweet-smelling hair of Mother Earth. Breathe it in and you start remembering things you didn't know you had forgotten. A sheaf of sweet grass, bound at the end and divided into thirds, is ready to braid. In braiding sweet grass, so that it is smooth, glossy, and worthy of a gift, a certain amount of tension is needed. As any little girl with tight braids will tell you, you have to pull a bit. Of course, you can do it yourself by tying one hand to a chair or by holding it in your teeth and braiding backward away from yourself. But the sweetest way is to have someone else hold the hand so that you pull gently against each other, all the while leaning in head to head, chatting and laughing, watching each other's hands, one holding steady while the other shifts the slim bundles of the one another, each in its turn. Linked by sweetgrass, there is reciprocity between you. Linked by sweetgrass, the holder as vital as the braider. The braid becomes finer and thinner as you near the end, until braiding individual blades of grass, and then you tie it off. And then I will ask Mia.
Will you hold the end of the bundle while I braid, hands joined by grass? Can we bend our heads together and make a braid to honor the earth? And then I'll hold it for you while you braid too. I could hand you a braid of sweetgrass as thick and shining as the plate that hung down my grandmother's back, but it is not mine to give, nor yours to take. Weengash belongs to herself, so I offer in its place a braid of stories meant to heal our relationship with the world. This braid is woven from 3 strands, and indigenous ways of knowing, scientific knowledge, and the story of an Anishinaabe scientist trying to bring them together in service to what matters most. It is an intertwining of science, spirit, and story. Old stories and new ones that can be medicine for our broken relationship with Earth. A pharmacopoeia of healing stories that allow us to imagine a different relationship in which people and land are good medicine for each other. Braiding sweetgrass. And I'll pass to Jessica Johnston.
Planting sweetgrass. Sweetgrass is best planted not by seed, but by putting roots directly in the ground. Thus, the plant is passed from hand to earth to hand across years and generations. Its favorite habitat is sunny, well-watered meadows. It thrives along disturbed edges. And I'll pass it to Lauren.
Sky Woman Falling. In winter, when the green earth lies resting beneath a blanket of snow, this is the time for storytelling. The storytellers begin by calling upon those who came before, who passed the stories down to us, for we are only messengers. In the beginning, there was the sky world. And I'll pass it on to Ansu.
She fell like a maple seed, pirouetting on an autumn breeze. a column of light streamed from a hole in the sky world, marking her path where only darkness had been before. It took her a long time to fall. In fear, or maybe hope, she clutched a bundle tightly in her hand. Hurtling downward, she saw only dark water below. But in that emptiness, there were many eyes gazing up at the sudden shaft of light. They saw there a small object, a mere dust mote in the beam. As it grew closer, they could see that it was a woman, arms outstretched, long black hair billowing behind as she spiraled toward them. The geese nodded at one another and rose together from the water in a wave of goose music. She felt the beat of their wings as they flew beneath to break her fall. Far from the only home she'd ever known, she caught her breath at the warm embrace of soft feathers as they gently carried her downward. And so it began. The geese could not hold the woman above the water for much longer, so they called a council to decide what to do. Resting on their wings, she saw them all gather: loons, otters, swans, beavers, fish of all kinds. A great turtle floated in their midst and offered his back for her to rest upon. Gratefully, she stepped from the goose wings onto the dome of his shell. The others understood that she needed land for her home and discussed how they might serve her need. The deep divers among them had heard of mud at the bottom of the water and agreed to go find some. Loon dove first, but the distance was too far, and after a long while he surfaced with nothing to show for his efforts. One by one, the other animals offered to help: otter, beaver, sturgeon, but the depth, the darkness, and the pressures were too great for even the strongest of swimmers. They returned gasping for air with their heads ringing. Some did not return at all. Soon, only little muskrat was left, the weakest diver of all. He volunteered to go while the others looked on doubtfully. His small legs flailed as he worked his way downward, and he was gone a very long time. They waited and waited for him to return, fearing the worst for their relative. And before long, a stream of bubbles rose with the small, limp body of the muskrat. He had given his life to aid this helpless human. But then the others noticed that his paw was tightly clenched, and when they opened it, there was a small handful of mud. Turtle said, "Here, put it on my back, and I will hold it." Who shall I pass it on to? Anyone?
I'll read. Sky Woman bent and spread the mud with her hands across the shell of the turtle. Moved by the extraordinary gifts of the animals, she sang in thanksgiving and then began to dance, her feet caressing the earth. The land grew and grew as she danced her thanks, from the dab of mud on Turtle's back until the whole earth was made, not by Sky Woman alone, but from the alchemy of all the animals' gifts, coupled with her deep gratitude. Together they formed what we know today as Turtle Island, our home. Like any good guest, Sky Woman had not come empty-handed. The bundle was still clutched in her hand. When she toppled from the hole in the sky world, she had reached out to grab onto the tree of life that grew there. In her grasp were branches, fruits and seeds of all kinds of plants. These she scattered onto the new ground and carefully tended each one until the world turned from brown to green. Sunlight streamed through the hole from the sky world, allowing the seeds to flourish. Wild grasses, flowers, trees, and medicines spread everywhere. And now that the animals, too, had plenty to eat, many came to live with her on Turtle Island.
Our stories say that all of the plants, Wingashk or sweetgrass, was the very first to grow on the earth. Its fragrance a sweet memory of Sky Woman's hand. Accordingly, it is honored as one of the 4 sacred plants of my people. Breathe in its scent and you start to remember things you didn't know you'd forgotten. Our elders say that ceremonies are the way we remember to remember. And so sweetgrass is a powerful ceremonial plant, cherished by many indigenous nations. It is also used to make beautiful baskets, both medicine and a relative. Its value is both material and spiritual. There is such tenderness in braiding the hair of someone you love. Kindness and something more flow between the braider and the braided, the two connected by the cord of the plait. Wingashk waves in strands, long and shining, like a woman's freshly washed hair. And so we say it is the flowing hair of Mother Earth. When we braid sweetgrass, we are braiding the hair of Mother Earth, showing her our loving attention, our care for her beauty and well-being, in gratitude for all she has given us. Children hearing the Sky Woman's story from birth know in their bones the responsibility that flows between humans and the earth.
The story of Sky Woman's journey is so rich and glittering. It feels to me like a deep bowl of celestial blue from which I could drink again and again. It holds our beliefs, our history, our relationships. Looking into that starry bowl, I see images swirling so fluidly that the past and the present become as one. Images of Sky Woman speak not just of where we came from, but also of how we can go forward. I have Bruce King's portrait of Sky Woman, Moments in Flight, hanging in my lab. Floating to earth with her handful of seeds and flowers, she looks down on my microscopes and data loggers. It might seem an odd juxtaposition, but to me, she belongs there. As a writer, a scientist, and a carrier of Sky Woman's story, I sit at the feet of my elder teachers listening for their songs.
On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9:35 a.m., I am usually in a lecture hall at the university expounding about botany and ecology, trying in short to explain to my students how Sky Woman's gardens, known by some as global ecosystems, function. One otherwise unremarkable morning, I gave the students in my general ecology class a survey. Among other things, they were asked to rate their understanding of the negative interactions between humans and the environment. Nearly every one of the 200 students said confidently that humans and nature are a bad mix. These were third-year students who had selected a career in environmental protection, so the response was, in a way, not very surprising. They were well schooled in the mechanics of climate change, toxins in the land and water, and the crisis of habitat loss. Later in the survey, they were asked to rate their knowledge of positive interactions between people and land. The median response was none. I was stunned. How is it possible that in 20 years of education, they cannot think of any beneficial relationships between people and the environment. Perhaps the negative examples they see every day, brown fields, factory farms, suburban sprawl, truncated their ability to see some good between humans and the earth. As the land becomes impoverished, so does the scope of their vision. When we talked about this after class, I realized that they could not even imagine what beneficial relations between their species and others might look like. How can we begin to move toward ecological and cultural sustainability if we cannot even imagine what that path feels like? If we can't imagine the generosity of geese? These students were not raised on the story of Sky Woman.
On one side of the world were people whose relationship with the living world was shaped by Sky Woman, who created a garden for the well-being of all. On the other side was another woman with a garden and a tree. But for tasting its fruit, she was banished from the garden, and the gates clanged shut behind her. That mother of men was made to wander in the wilderness and earn her bread by the sweat of her brow, not by filling her mouth with the sweet, juicy fruits that bend the branches low. In order to eat, she was instructed to subdue the wilderness into which she was cast. Same species, same earth, different stories. Like creation stories everywhere, cosmologies are a source of identity and orientation to the world. They tell us who we are. We are inevitably shaped by them, no matter how distant they may be from our consciousness. One story leads to the generous embrace of the living world, the other to banishment. One woman is our ancestral gardener, a co-creator of the good green world that would be the home of her descendants. The other was an exile, just passing through an alien world on a rough road to her real home in heaven. And then they meet, the offspring of Sky Woman and the children of Eve. And the land around us bears the scars of that meeting, the echoes of our stories. They say that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And I can only imagine the conversation between Eve and Sky Woman. Sister, you got the short end of the stick.
The Sky Woman story, shared by the original peoples throughout the Great Lakes, is a constant star in the constellation of teachings we call the original instructions. These are not instructions like commandments, though, or rules. Rather, they are like a compass. They provide an orientation, but not a map. The work of living is creating that map for yourself. How to follow the original instructions will be different for each of us and different for every era. In their time, Sky Woman's first people lived by their understanding of the original instructions, with ethical prescriptions for respectful hunting, family life, ceremonies that made sense for the world. Those measures for caring might not seem to fit in today's urban world, where green means an advertising slogan, not a meadow. The buffalo are gone and the world has moved on. I can't return salmon to the river, and my neighbors would raise the alarm if I set fire to my yard to produce pasture for elk. The earth was then new. The earth was new then, when it welcomed the first human. It's old now, and some suspect that we have worn out our welcome by casting the original instructions aside. From the very beginning of the world, the other species were a lifeboat for people. Now we must be theirs. But the stories that might guide us, if they are told at all, grow dim in the memory. What meaning would they have today? How can we translate from the stories at the world's beginning to this hour, so much closer to its end? The landscape has changed, but the story remains. And as I turn it over again and again, Sky Woman seems to look me in the eye and ask, in return for this gift of the world on Turtle's back, what will I give in return? It is good to remember that the original woman was herself an immigrant. She fell a long way from her home in the sky world, leaving behind all who knew her and who held her dear. She could never go back. Since 1492, most here are immigrants as well, perhaps arriving at Ellis Island without even knowing that Turtle Island rested beneath their feet. Some of my ancestors are Sky Woman's people, and I belong to them. Some of my ancestors were the newer kind of immigrants too, a French fur trader, an Irish carpenter, a Welsh farmer. And here we all are on Turtle Island, trying to make a home. Their stories of arrival with empty pockets and nothing but hope resonate with Sky Woman's. She came here with nothing but a handful of seeds and with the slimmest of instructions to use your gifts and dreams for good. The same instructions we all carry. She accepted the gifts from the other beings with open hands and used them honorably. She shared the gifts she brought from Skyworld as she set herself about the business of flourishing, of making home.
Perhaps the Sky Woman story endures because we are always falling. Our lives, both personal and collective, share her trajectory. Whether we jump or are pushed, or the edge of the known world just crumbles at our feet, we fall, spinning into someplace new and unexpected. Despite our fears of falling, the gifts of the world stand by to catch us. As we consider these instructions, it is also good to recall that when Sky Woman arrived here, she did not come alone. She was pregnant. Knowing her grandchildren would inherit the world she left behind, she did not work for flourishing in her time only. It was through her actions of reciprocity, the give and take with the land, that the original immigrant became indigenous. For all of us, becoming indigenous to a place means living as if our children's future mattered, to take care of the land as if our lives, both material and spiritual, depended on it. In the public arena, I've heard the Sky Woman story told as a babble of colorful folklore. But even when it is misunderstood, there's power in the telling. Most of my students have never heard the origin story of this land where they were born. But when I tell them, something begins to kindle behind their eyes. Can we all understand the Sky Woman's story not as an artifact from the past, but as instructions for the future? Can a nation of immigrants once again follow her examples to become native, to make a home?
Look at the legacy of poor Eve's exile from Eden. The land shows the bruises of an abusive relationship. It's not just the land that is broken, but more importantly, our relationship to the land. As Gary Nobhan has written, we can't meaningfully proceed with healing, with restoration, without restoration. In other words, our relationship with land cannot heal until we hear its stories. But who will tell them? In the Western tradition, there is a recognized hierarchy of beings with, of course, the human being on top, the pinnacle of evolution, the darling of creation, and the plants at the bottom. But In native ways of knowing, human people are often referred to as the younger brothers of creation. We say that humans have the last experience with how to live and thus the most to learn. We must look to our teachers among the other species for guidance. Their wisdom is apparent in the way that they live. They teach us by example. They've been on the earth far longer than we have been and have had time to figure things out. They live both above and below ground, joining sky world. To the earth. Plants know how to make food and medicine from light and water, and then they give it away. I like to imagine that when Sky Woman scattered her handful of seeds across the Turtle Island, she was sowing sustenance for the body and also for the mind, emotion, and spirit. She was leaving us teachers. The plants can tell us her story. We need to learn to listen.
All right, Izzy, that was the closing of that section, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
So usually we read questions after the reading, but we want to try something new this time, just kind of after we complete the reading, just completely opening the space to any kind of commentary or even the silence. So if anyone has something to say or wants to share, that's great. But if not, we can just ruminate on what the beautiful words we just read.
I mean, I'll start. And I want to just say that this was a really great text to choose for this session. I love it. And I did read the book a few years ago. But my reflection was how well she illustrated it without a force, without in not a very forceful way. She illustrated the difference with Western science. And that paradigm of Western science is, how do you know? You know because of evidence, you know because of observation, you know because of data, you know because of experiment and tangible things that you can either detect through your senses or that you have instrumentation to detect, like light from 200 million years ago through the Hubble telescope, or a microscope looking at things that the naked eye can't see. And based on the detected data, you can know whether that fits a model, which is a model created out of imagination, because we can only know what we see, but most of science is models of reality. And the data should tell you whether it fits that reality or whether the model needs tweaking. And that is as narrow and as tight And that is the rational justification that science keeps pursuing, Western science keeps pursuing. And if there's any difference of opinion between scientists, the model is keep on testing, finesse your models, and just infinitely extend the argument. And so against that model of knowing, which exerts a very superior claim to know reality, look at the story of Sky Woman. You know, how do you know Sky Woman fell from the sky? What is the evidence? So Western science would be like, oh yeah, that's a tribal myth, you know, end of story. But the way that she invokes the cosmological story of Eve, and the way that it comes through as a model of underlying a model of knowing, was just very subtle and beautiful. So in many ways, science is extremely useful as a way of knowing, Western sciences, but look at the consequences of limiting your vision to that. Because the kids in her first year, third year class of environmental studies couldn't imagine even something like a beneficial sort of caretaking use of reality. So I love this passage, and that was a good choice. Easy.
I was also really struck by the comparison with the Eve story. I had never really, I mean, obviously, the idea that you could be cast out of a garden is, you know, we know that that's not a very nurturing, not a very nurturing story, but thinking of it, you know, in this direct comparison to this fertile world that the Sky Woman has created, and then thinking of the idea that Eve is punished and cast out for picking a fruit from a tree when that's such a natural human thing to do. And, you know, this idea that the tree is not meant to nourish humans, it just really underscored the difference of these two systems of well, I don't even want to say like spirituality, but just these two hierarchical structures. Well, I mean, one is a hierarchical structure and one is more of a shared an even playing field. And I just was really struck by that. I mean, the whole preface was really so beautiful and powerful, and I love her language. It's just really gorgeous book.
Something that this passage makes me really think about is just how impactful the stories and the narratives are that we carry around and that we propagate and that we share and that we create. Because as she talks about, you know, if we can't imagine a world where, you know, this is happening, or you know, I think she was talking about the geese. It just really makes you think about, like, I think sometimes we think our stories and our narratives are fixed, but that's kind of the illusion of the world in many ways, I think, is that we encounter a story or a narrative and see it as a fixed item, but in reality, we're generating narratives and stories and ideas all the time. And I think this book has really made me think about what is the source of our stories? What is the source of the stories that guide my own life and that guide all of your lives? And it just really makes me think about how important it is to have spaces like this where we tell another story or create a space for more stories to be shared and understood, because they really do impact perception and what we can imagine being possible.
Yeah, something that really has stuck with me through the preface and Sky Woman Falling is when she's describing holding sweetgrass in your hand and saying, smell it and you'll begin to remember things that you didn't know you've forgotten. And thinking about what it means to remember things that you didn't know that you've forgotten. What does that mean? What can that mean for you personally? And even though it's such a poetic statement, it seems very clear in many ways to me, like what that could mean, because it's like a feeling that I feel even through reading this text, I experience is like remembering things, feeling things in such a deep experiential way through her storytelling. And also like how DNA is encoded in all of us and is not something that exists within us as you know, beings that are separate from each other or from the entangled web of life. It's all encoded within each other, and it's bound and wrapped together like a helix and a helix and a helix. So thinking about remembering things that you didn't know that you've forgotten, it's like it's a part of you, it's inside of you. It's all interconnected, even through memory and storytelling, and and it's all a braid.
There was something that you talked about DNA that jogged my memory, because there was something recently that I've read about, you know, how the theory of evolution says that there are random mutations in the DNA, and then depending on how that mutation interacts with the external circumstances of the world, it's either a positive or a selection for being stronger and more able to survive, or it sort of goes away over time, over successive generations. And doing research out of UC Davis on grass, but not sweetgrass, it was another species of grass, which has a short lifespan, so they could measure like 30 generations over 5 years or something. They found that the mutations of the DNA are really not that random as was thought for the past 50 years since they found the strand of DNA. The way that the DNA changes in grass is to limit changes to the genes, the most important genes of its reproduction and its central form, and make changes on external things that are not as central to its identity. So I was thinking about previous sessions we've learned about intelligence and self-conscious intelligence versus another kind of intelligence. And every day Western science is making these discoveries that it's not just, you know, a superior human intelligence that is able to, you know, navigate the world in a specific way. at all levels, there are intelligent, animated things going on. And this turns the whole thing of evolution on its head, that it's just random mutations, because it seems like the grass was deciding where the mutations would happen more frequently and not in its central reproductive and form genes. It's just mind-blowing.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. And also how like by shifting, turning this notion of evolution on its head, this like more classically accepted scientific, Western scientific model of evolution, turning that on its head, it also then shifts our understanding of ways that we might relate to other species, the same way that like the Eve story versus the Sky Woman falling story creates an ethos for the ways that we exist amongst one another. And if maybe people are able to accept that grass are agents of their own evolution in a conscious, sentient, or, you know, in a conscious way, then that might, one would hope that that would change people's behavior towards grass as well.
We picked up on the braiding itself as an important thing to pursue in the title of this short 6-week interlude. The idea that she braided together, that's a way of talking about this act of making that this series, Learning and Mending, is exploring, that there's something in doing and practicing that brings out this braided meaning of making, meaning, and metaphor, like all kind of coming together. So in the preface section that we read, where she actually describes the way this single blade of sweetgrass can be unfurled in 3 parts, is also, I think, a very potent physical making description, which I think is so wonderful, where she actually is describing in an observational way something that becomes a metaphor for you know, consciousness in a way. So I put a link in the chat bar to an artist named Adelaide Mers, who does performative diagrammatics, and she's actually uses something in her performances called the braid. So for those of you who want to have a look at her site, she's thinking about questions that she pulls together with groups, like building a culture of gentleness, and then using the braid as a way to kind of explore that on a group level. So I thought that might be an interesting connection.
Yeah, it's interesting, that phrase, the culture of gentleness. That's very appealing to me. And sorry, my dog is barking at the door. Lulu, come here. Oh, it's okay, buddy. It's interesting because it makes me think about how much I appreciate that kind of vibe and that kind of space. And, I guess as I think about it, it's because I feel like in a culture of gentleness, I'm going to be protected. I'm going to be heard. And not just me, but the notion is that everyone in the space will be protected and be heard. And it makes me think of when I have heard pushback or resistance to that kind of language. It makes me wonder what is that really about? Why is a culture of care and gentleness threatening to some people, or why does that feel uncomfortable to 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 some folks? You know, and it's just an interesting notion, like thinking about what are the things that make us feel comfortable and safe, and what are the types of characteristics that lead to more safety and more protection and more gentleness for more people.
I loved the idea of these animals helping this woman who falls from the sky. And I think during the pandemic, it's a beautiful story and metaphor, but it's also holds a template of a different way we can be in reciprocity with nature. And during this pandemic, when we're so isolated and crushed by various degrees of loneliness and just the struggle of feeling connected right now, that there was just such a profound shift for me when I read this book about what it meant to befriend my muskrat that was like in the lake in front of my house, and what lessons I could learn about home and building from the muskrat. And as I like took a year to kind of understand how the land that I live on could take care of me, the only version of that we have is like a glimpse of Snow White, like having this really reciprocal relationship to the animals around her, like actually helping her. And we just don't have that narrative where we see us as doing things to animals or the land. And we really don't have very good stories about the teachings of the animals or plants, or the ways in which our genetics like has co-evolved with their genetics, and how essential our dependence on them and the habitats that we restore for them is to our own survival.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you, Sarah, so much for sharing your direct experience and allowing yourself to be vulnerable here emotionally. I think that's takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery. And I feel you. What you're saying really resonates with me. And I do think we have a lack of stories and models and narratives to associate with, value systems that emulate where we want the paradigms to be. Um, yeah, it's interesting. It makes me think of, as humans, we're animals, clearly. Uh, we're animals that wear clothes and live in houses, a lot of us, and you know, but we are animals. So much of our stories uh, us as this other thing outside of the Earth system or outside of so many of these things that structure the universe, and it's rather weird and so created um, integrated way to think about humans in relationship to the world at large and the earth. Does anyone feel like sharing something about what they've been working on here tonight, or any other discussion that they'd like to share before we move on to our closing meditation for the evening?
Yeah, I just had kind of a new thought. Because I'm looking forward to how this does get all braided together in this book, and the science and the feeling of the story and the physical, which seems like comes up in so many philosophies, and I know in my own practice, this sense of having disparate parts, the thinking and the feeling and the physical intelligence. And it just occurred to me that in the symbol of the braid, like maybe they just all live alongside each other, and maybe some absolute integration isn't even required. So that was my revelation for this evening.
I really like that, Olan. It makes me think of boundaries and the ways that boundaries can be really so porous just based on perspective, like if you're taking the braid as a whole or by a strand. And I think that that's a great metaphor for beginning this reading of this book together. So thank you for that.
I just stepped outside so that I could let you guys hear the sound of the frogs where I live. Because after the rain, there's lots of frogs right now. But as soon as I stepped outside, they all became silent, not one. And it's just so remarkable to me how they all begin at the same time and they all stop at the same time. I don't really understand what's happening there, but they're in total unison together. It's pretty amazing. Maybe they'll start again.
I had a thought after Olan, what you shared about during the break, right around the solstice, in celebration of solstice time, a friend of mine, colleague, who teaches and lives on a reservation on a farm in East San Diego, had a circle, a fire circle, braiding sweetgrass brooms, and we have one, but it's outside right now, so I don't want to take the time to go get it. But for several hours, people were braiding their brooms and, having this beautiful food and fire and music together, and lots of dogs and animals, other animals together. So I just had that remembrance of the braiding near and next to each other, and lots of stories were told in the circle, but there was something very powerful of everyone braiding their sweetgrass brooms. So it was very sweet, very beautiful. Giving me more food for thought about it after now, after reading that and listening to everyone. So thank you.
I have a question then. I thought that sweetgrass didn't grow our part of the world. So you're saying that it's grown in eastern San Diego County? Is it there any grown anywhere near us so we can get some and smell it? Please?
I can certainly find out. She's not growing it there, but she had it also. She was on San Pasqual Reservation before. Now she's on, I think it's Palma Valley. It's more east, and I don't think it comes from there, but I'll find out.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll bring some to show next time.
I wanted to share that I appreciate the link that Lauren shared of the artist's braid facilitation approach. And like something I really enjoyed about this excerpt we read was the original instructions, and how we all have unique instructions depending on who we are in the world. And looking at the artist's braid ideas makes me think about how like how can I view my role or my instructions not just as like one duty, but as a, a braid that has like different dimensions. Because if I'm just doing restoration work, like that's one duty, but if I'm doing restoration work, engaging the public, doing all these other dimensions of that, like that creates more relation. I feel like that's the real uh, dynamic that I would like to work towards.
Could you speak out loud because I'm joining on gold song?
Jasmine, thanks for sharing that. That was really nice to hear that reflection and kind of reinterpretation. I think that I'm ready to share and move us into our audio visual meditation, if that is all right.
Sure. Should I explain a little bit what it is?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Couple of years ago.
You do something from
What? A couple of years ago, we started to pound out some of the tarmac on an old towing yard, just to see what would happen if we broke up some of the tarmac. And we made 60-foot study circles where we just took the tarmac off, took the base off, and did nothing else but let light shine on the ground again. And in the process of watching the abundance that is life kind of reboot itself, I asked Emily if she would observe what was happening with her incredible video skills. And the results of removing tarmac and base and adding sunlight and spreading a little bit of rainwater collected from an old industrial roof is what you're about to see. And this is in a place that is the most unlikely place to be so full of abundance. So we thought we would close out today's evening with some beautiful selected images from the abundance that we're observing on this old parking lot in Lincoln Heights at the edge of the LA River, which is today in the news because people are desperate on every side of this property and are stealing packages off of freight trains that are moving goods from the port of Long Beach around the world, around the North American world. So the idea that you can have these different narratives literally one on top of each other is kind of interesting to imagine. But this too is happening, and this too is news, and this too is life. So we thought we'd share that with you as a kind of closing meditation.
So I will share my screen once again, and we're going to, in the spirit of One Earth, we're going to be folded into many locations. We'll be in Los Angeles at Metabolic. We'll be in my home forest in Oregon. We'll be at various points throughout the world where myself and others have documented living systems through the lens of Metabolic Studio and through the lens of witnessing our climate and where it is and where it's going. So let me go ahead and share. If you don't hear sound within the first 10 seconds of this video, can someone flag me? Because I'm going to try to share directly from the computer rather than have it go through my computer microphone.
Sounds good.
Oh, I should also say that we have a quote from the author at the beginning of this meditation where she was engaged in an interview about her book Gathering Moss, and so you'll see that we start with we start with her voice and images of moss from my home forest. Okay, so let's see, 1 second. Share sound. Oops.
You know, for me, a really pivotal time was that I had spent decades on my knees before mosses. You know, for me, a really pivotal time was that I had spent decades on my knees before mosses. You know, the most overlooked beings in the plant kingdom. They had become my teachers. They're extraordinary beings that no one even pays attention to. And I looked at my, I guess you'd call it my body of work, and said, oh, those are very nice scientific papers about the life of mosses. But I felt in a way that I was betraying them because they had taught me so much, and I was forced through writing peer-reviewed scientific articles to reduce what they had taught me to p-values and data tables and graphs, and it seemed dishonest. Isn't that strange that, you know, by using these tools of objective science, I felt like I couldn't tell the truth? And so
peer-reviewed, but
right,
dishonest.
Dishonest, because I was telling only this much of what I had learned, and in a language which excluded the world from really celebrating mosses, because, you know, who's going to read that? We're not. So I wanted to tell the truth about mosses, and I wanted their teachings that had been shared with me. I understood the tremendous privilege of having been their student, and that I wanted to open that door to other people. I wanted to tell the truth about mosses, and I wanted their teachings that had been shared with me. I understood the tremendous privilege of having been their student, and that I wanted to open that door to other people.
Wow.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.